This is a fun one, folks. Here's a fun one. 400-pound NYPD robot gets tryout in Times Square subway station. The K5, described as a fully autonomous security robot, is part of a push by the mayor for more law enforcement technology, which has raised concerns among privacy advocates. What weighs almost 400 pounds, asked the New York Times, stands roughly 5'3", and according to Mayor Eric Adams, will be a valuable tool in New York City. Well, that's 400 pounds and 5'3". Maybe it eats fudge rounds. Maybe this sounds like an Oliver Anthony lyric. It lives on fudge rounds. It's 5'3", weighs 400 pounds, and it's funded by taxpayer dollars. How do you like that? So it's taxpayer funded, 5'3", 400 pounds. Looks like this is a welfare queen we got on our hands here, going to be patrolling the subway. Well, it'll be a valuable tool in New York City's law enforcement efforts. Yeah, exactly. To Mark Radlin, a restaurant manager, it looks like an oversized version of R2-D2, the droid from the Star Wars films. I don't know what it's supposed to be, he said as he took a picture of the object. Albert Fox-Kahn, the executive director of the Surveillance Technology Oversight Project, a privacy and civil rights group, had a more dismissive view. A trash can on wheels, he called it. Its official name is K5, and its California-based maker, Nightscope, describes it as a fully autonomous outdoor security robot. It is currently used in hospitals, malls, airports, warehouses, and casinos, and will soon be deployed in the Times Square subway station, the city's busiest underground transit hub. Here we're going to see some video of a press conference where the mayor and some NYPD brass sort of show off the robot and answer some questions. So here we go.
The K5 will operate between midnight and 6 a.m. at the Times Square subway station for 2 months. With the duration of the trial, it will be accompanied by a police officer at all times. And for the first 2 weeks, it will be trained to map out the station. It will move around the main station area and not on the platform. We want to be clear on that. It will record video that can be reviewed in case of an emergency or a crime. It will not record audio, and it will not use facial recognition. However, the K5 does have a button that connects you immediately to a live person that New Yorkers can utilize 24/7 with questions, concerns, or to report an incident if needed. And at the end of the 2 months, we will assess the robot's effectiveness and decide whether and how we'll continue to use it moving forward. New Yorkers have strong opinion on technology. I like to say 8.3 million New Yorkers, 35 million opinions. So you're going to hear them all. But they are going to feel the presence of technology that will continue to keep them safe. It's cost effective. $9, I think, an hour. $9 an hour. That's below minimum wage. And we only pay for it when it's being operated.
How much does it actually cost to buy one of these things?
We're not buying, we're leasing. $9 an hour.
All right, so on the one hand, this seems like sort of an Orwellian escalation of the police state. On the other hand, it is kind of sweet to see cops losing their jobs to minimum wage AI. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I mean, that is a little bit satisfying, I have to say. But he goes on.
$9 an hour. I know you wanted to write how we're wasting money, but I'm sorry, I'm taking your thunder away. We're leasing at $9 an hour. This is a good investment in taxpayers' dollars. And I'm hoping you're going to put a line in your story how cost efficient I am, because I should get that. This is below minimum wage. You know, no bathroom breaks, no meal breaks. This is a good investment. So please make sure he adds that in his story, okay?
All right. Let's see, what do we got here?
New York mayors for decades. This is the beginning of the end of their hegemony.
Yeah, exactly.
Your move, creep.
Yeah. I just did your RoboCop sound drop. I know you probably couldn't hear it. But I hit that one for you.
Yeah,
So
like nobody's seen RoboCop. You know, like right now, this is innocent enough, right? It's just gonna kind of have a call box button and whatever. I mean, as you were saying, it's probably it seems like more PR than purpose, really.
well, yeah, of
But
course, it seems like more PR than purpose because they already have call boxes in the subway stations. They already have cameras in the subway stations.
right, just
And so
add
this
more if
seems
you
to
feel
be
like
designed for, right, just add more cameras and more call boxes, right? What do you need this for? I think this is designed to boost tourism. To make tourists feel safer because they are employing this at the busiest transit hub, but it's also the most touristy of the transit hubs. It's certainly not one of the less safe transit hubs in the city. There are hundreds of subway stations far less safe than the Times Square subway station that they could put this on if they really thought that this was going to make people safer. I think this is a PR move. It's Times Square. It's for tourism revenue, and I think ultimately they want people back on the subways. They just had a positive subway month last month, but as you mentioned, over the past several years, people have been taking the subway less and less, which is partly because of the sort of work from home trend that's sort of residual from the pandemic, but also the fact that crime has ticked up and people feel a little more uneasy about taking the subway in general. And so I think this is an effort to make people feel like they are safer because of this RoboCop patrolling the subway stations. And it's not even on the platforms either. It can't be on the platforms because if they put it on the platforms, of course, it would really end up on the tracks, which is something that they talk about here because there are some questions about vandalism. So let me just play this first.
I'm just curious if there's any concern about vandalization and other things.
She just asked about vandalization.
Great question, and here's why we are fiscally smart. Someone damaged the robot, they would pay for it. So yes,
Great plan.
Are you going to get pranksters? Yes. But eventually this is going to be part of the fabric of our subway system, and people are going to see it. They're going to see the benefits of it. They're going to communicate to ask questions. If need, they're going to hit the emergency button. So yes, but we are also going to have, we have a way of making sure that we're monitoring and make sure people are not damaging the equipment. And let's be clear, this is not a pushover. Some damage, 420 pounds.
Let me say this. If anyone destroys this or vandalizes this, they're going to be captured on video, and we're going to prosecute them. And they're going to be arrested. And depending on the
this is why I always love New York City, because the first place everyone's mind goes when they see this is this fucking thing's going to get the shit beat out of it as soon as they drop it into the public. That's their first question. So what happens when people just go ham on this fucking thing, right? He's like, yeah, just so you know, you will be prosecuted. All right, and then we don't have to watch the whole rest of that. He goes on to mention, the camera feature and the call feature, which, Russell, as you were saying offline before we went on, they already have those features installed. So what exactly is this fucking thing here for?
Yeah, and I think you're right. It's PR. Although, they're probably thinking long term. Right now it's innocent enough. Pretty soon that thing's going to be strapped with a couple semi-automatics.
Right.
And be fucking people up, man. It's the frog in the pot of boiling water. You can't just introduce the OPM murderous robot all at once.
Right, exactly right.
You got to work up to that shit. So just make it a friendly camera toting robot for now.
Right. Then they'll come up with the excuse where actually we're going to turn on facial recognition. Right.
Yeah.
They'll add a feature.
Yeah. It'll be a slippery slope, and before you know it, you'll be in that dystopian RoboCop nightmare of the non-cyborg, the one he had to fight at the end. That's what this is going to evolve into. It's going to be like the big egg-shaped thing with the legs that was with the two carbines. That's what this is going to wind up being in 10 years.
Yeah. No. Sorry, go ahead.
Although New York, right after the pandemic, the subway was definitely a little sketchy. It hasn't really felt that way for a while. Like, I think a lot of places were a little weird right after the pandemic. What was that movie with Adam Driver that kind of captured that weird vibe afterwards on Netflix?
Oh yeah,
movie?
White Noise.
White Noise, yeah. There was definitely a weird vibe, and you had that weird vibe, I think, everywhere. But in New York, it was like triple because it's New York. And you definitely had like more crazy on the subway and that kind of thing. Now, really, I'll be interested to see if it's a noticeable shift when I go back because, the migrant crisis is really spiraling into a crisis now. Like,
well, and Adams is very hawkish on that. I mean, Adams is a fascist. I mean, he is, and that's not to say that everybody who's concerned about that issue is a fascist. But look, he hugging the RoboCop. He is a cop, right? I mean, he is the biggest asshole in the city, famous around the world for its assholes. That's what I say. New York is famous for its assholes, and they found the biggest one in New York, and they put him in charge of it.
I will say, as a New Yorker, every now and then in these travels, I've had to check myself. Because as a New Yorker, you're just fucking naturally pushy. Like if you're put in situations where there's a crowded line of people all trying to get through, as a New Yorker, your tendency is gonna be to fucking elbow people out of your way.
right.
You know what I mean? And like, you really got to check that impulse and be like, just like if you learn to drive in New York and then you go live in another city, it takes you about a month to learn not to drive like an asshole because you're used to having to assume that no one will let you in.
Right.
And then you figure out, oh no, they'll let you in other places. They act like fucking human beings. You don't have to be an animal on the road. Like, and in fact, in New York, you can drive that way without really risking life and limb because everyone expects you to drive that way. If you drive that way other places, they don't expect to get cut off like that.
Right.
You're going to fucking cause an accident. But yeah, I could already see before I left, like now you're seeing migrant families, camped out on Fifth Avenue. And this is why I said, it's funny, you got all the liberals screaming about how horrible these, DeSantis is and Abbott is. Why? What? They're making you share in the burden that they have. Like, why? You've been saying all these years that they're racist for complaining about it. So why are you complaining about it? Shut up. Right? I mean, that's why I said from the beginning it was a genius troll. But at the same time, you want to talk about like trying to. The city feels a little like it's spiraling out of control, and it's partly because of that, because that's putting enormous pressure on the city's resources. So this could be tied to that as well.
I think it's much more macro factors. It's much more the segment that we did earlier. People are poorer all across the board. I mean, I was just in the city recently, and you see a lot more homeless than I did back when I lived there, way more. Just in the limited time I was there. I was there basically for one night. You just see a huge difference. And I think that is because mostly of just macroeconomic trends.
Oh, yeah. But I'm saying, I think part of why he might be rolling out this robot is to obscure all that. Look, we have a robot. Doris, come to Broadway. We have a robot. Don't worry.
That's what it is. Yeah,
nothing's going to happen.
It's to give people the illusion that he's on it and that you're safer with this fucking robot patrolling a subway station. Where, so the way the Times Square subway hub is laid out, you have the platforms, which the trains come and they stop, and then they pick you up and then they take off. But then there are like 2 tiers of basically an indoor mall. I mean, the Times Square subway station is basically an underground mall. You got, I mean, back when I lived there, you had a video game store down there. Right, you got a deli down there, right? I mean, it's not a place where people generally feel unsafe. You have there's always music down there, there's always people out, playing, for tips and things like that. And there's always a ton of people there because it's Times Square. Generally, you tend to have problems in the more isolated subway stops. That's where things tend to happen when there's nobody around to catch you.
Put it in the South Bronx.
Right, you put it in the South Bronx. But again, you put something like that out in East New York in the South Bronx, it's ending up on the tracks. And then you got a big problem. Then you got a big expense of fixing the head car of the train, which you can't do for $9 an hour.
Please clap.